Coming up after the break, have you ever taken Cold FX to kick those awful cold symptoms? A new lawsuit alleges you may have been wasting your time. That story and more are next in the Roundup. When you have a cold, you'd be willing to do almost anything to relieve the symptoms. But a lawsuit claims that many sufferers have been duped by a common remedy. It's time for the Roundup.
Cold FX is the only natural health product clinically proven to boost our immune system, reducing the duration, severity, and frequency of cold and flu symptoms.
According to a lawsuit, those are claims that just don't stand up. A BC resident is suing the maker of Cold FX for misleading advertising. Today, Valiant Pharmaceuticals was in court opposing class action certification of the suit and fighting allegations they ignored their own research. The company denies the claims. Nicole Verkindt is the founder and president of OMX. She's here to talk about this story and others. So what's your reaction, Nicole?
I thought it was outrageous. I mean, we shouldn't have to be doing our own tests on drugs to find out whether or not they work. I couldn't believe that they had this test since 2004, and they knew that a placebo was actually more effective than the actual drug itself in some instances. I thought it was a real failure on the government's behalf for not catching this and not keeping them accountable, and I thought it was a failure on their behalf for essentially false marketing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure all this is going to be tested in court very soon, and the big question is it going to be a class action? I mean, just beyond this one guy, many. But to me, it's starting to sound so familiar. There are so many cases right now that relate to what a company knew and what did they reveal. I mean, we saw Exxon is being sued because supposedly they knew more about climate change. There's an investigation going on about that they keep that to themselves. NHL was in the news last week. How much did they know about the damage that can be done to enforcers and concussions and so forth? And to me, it sort of brings to mind, should companies stand up if they find something out about their product or their service or whatever and reveal it before they get sued, or is that too dangerous?
No, absolutely. They should have to be revealing it. I mean, it's completely unfortunate that we have to wait until the time to go after a class action lawsuit, which reminds me more of the United States. And I just think it's unfortunate. There should be something that requires them to stand up and say, we have this information and this is false marketing by saying this actually solves your symptoms.
And what about Valiant? I mean, as if Valiant hasn't had enough challenges lately with its share price and all the criticism. Now, this is this Cold FX company they bought in 2011. It looks like they just bought themselves another passel of trouble here.
Well, exactly. One more thing.
All right, so let's talk about what could be even more annoying than a cold, and that is air travel. The number of complaints about U.S. airlines rose last year to the highest level in more than a decade. According to researchers, low-cost carrier Spirit Airlines was the worst offender last year. For every 100,000 passengers it moved, it received almost 12 complaints. Now, that might not sound like much, but it's far more than the best performers like Alaska Airlines and Southwest. The top complaint throughout the industry: flight delays and cancellations, followed by lost bags and ticketing. The total number of complaints is the highest since the year 2000. What do you think about this, Nicole? These airlines have been improving their efficiency on a bunch of different levels, but complaints are going up.
Yeah, I think they're just going up because more people are traveling, and I think air travel is now a commodity, right? It's not the glamorous experience of the 60s, and unfortunately I know that too well. But I think our expectations for air travel is that it just works and that you don't have any complaints, right? So I want to arrive on time with my bag to the place where the ticket says I'm going to. And the only instance where I accept that I don't arrive on time is under safety situations. So I actually had a flight diverted last week from Mont Tremblant, and I was so happy we were diverted and the flight was canceled, right? So in that instance, I think we accept it. But we're also living in a Yelp culture, and maybe it's millennials, but we complain more. We're more used to complaining because now we have an outlet. So I can tweet when my flight is delayed, and Porter actually responds to me. And I can go on to Yelp when the restaurant was bad, or there's just so many instances now where we have outlets to complain. So I think that's also contributing to it. But I saw this, the stats are saying the number of complaints have increased, but I think the air travel has dramatically increased.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And, airlines are more profitable, and I think they are getting the the no frills service, I think they are improving on that element, and they're cutting all the other stuff. So
well, except that, just as we say, the airline that had the most complaints, Spirit Air, is also a no frills airline. So it's kind of like, well, you get what you pay for.
yeah, exactly.
And you don't get what you didn't pay for. All right, well, speaking of discounts, let's talk a little bit about Airbnb. In Vancouver, foreign buyers are being blamed for sky-high home prices, but in San Francisco, Airbnb has become a target, and the company is responding. Airbnb is going to crack down on users listing more than one home for a short-term rental in San Francisco. Critics complain that these owners drive up prices for local residents looking to rent by stripping away supply. Airbnb says it will look into its users that could be impacting the availability of long-term rental housing in the city. And Nicole, I was stunned at some of the background on this. Apparently, a one-bedroom apartment that's within 10 miles of San Francisco, the rent can be $3,700 a month. And they're blaming part of that on Airbnb.
Right, but when you own an asset, like an apartment, you have that choice, and that's capitalism, and you should be allowed to rent it on Airbnb or have less risk and have a long-term tenant. I mean, I used to rent my old apartment on Airbnb, and it takes a lot of work, and you have to service these people, and some of these renters come in, and they're expecting you to be their concierge and their housekeeper and all this kind of thing. So I think it's smart that Airbnb is doing this because they're trying to get out in front of it like Uber, and they're so disruptive that I think they're trying to make sure they're not, disrupting everybody and to such an extent that they're that upset with them. But
I think who they're going after is not a person like you. There's lots of legitimate users who they want to put their place on Airbnb, and that's totally what the service is built on, and that's fine. But there's apparently a lot of what Airbnb calls unwelcome commercial operators. So there are people now getting into the system who are not homeowners or apartment owners or whatever. They're just looking to make a buck. And so this is what they're trying to weed them out.
Exactly. It's now their full-time job. So they're actually really competing with the hotels, whereas Airbnb was initially set up to help people fully utilize their assets. So to come in and actually rent out a room when you're away for that 1 week, not to be a full-time gig. So that's what they're trying to get away from. And,
right. And San Francisco has an affordable housing crisis, so that's part of the issue here. But listen, let's talk about Elon Musk for a minute. He was in a bragging mood over the weekend thanks to huge pre-orders for the new Tesla Model 3 sedan. Tesla's CEO tweeted that as of Saturday night, 276,000 orders have been placed, a number that's likely risen since then. At $1,000 a pop for each pre-order, Tesla is approaching $300 million in revenue to play with. That's money that could be spent on ramping up production to deliver all those orders starting next year. If every one of those pre-orders turns into a firm sale, Musk says Tesla will rake in more than $11 billion. To put that sales number in context, though, Ford sold about the same number of vehicles in the U.S. just in the last month. What do you think, Nicole?
I think it's amazing. I mean, they took more deposits than all electric cars sold in the entire United States in 2015. So this is a huge triumph for the company. It really does remind me of the initial launches of Apple, and I think he will be successful. It looks like a great car. I was really happy to see the news.
Yeah, we'll see if it's going to raise the sales of electric vehicles across all brands as well. All right, well, thank you so much, Nicole.
Thanks, Dan.